And now I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Getting an ISO Information Security Certification. I'm going to hand things over to our featured presenter today. Not only is he a security instructor, but he is a managing director at Manus 360 Dallas, Bischoff Dallas. You now have the floor.
Well, thank you very much. And I guess these days we say good whatever time it is for you, out there in the world of virtual seminars and stuff and the times of COVID. I'm looking forward to providing this information. I've got a long-standing relationship with New Horizons. And so I'm sure that you'll find this both informative. I encourage you to ask lots of questions. As you'll see, I'm very well versed in this, and I'm going to say in advance that the presentation is laid out for your benefit and not as a marketing instrument. So I have plenty of ISO-related business and experience and stuff as you're going to see. So let's kind of focus on what an ISO certification means and what interests that you might have associated with that. So with that, let's go ahead and look at the agenda associated for today. So again, on the far right, what an ISO certification means and why certification is pursued, what the benefits are. All of those things need clarification. So when I'm working with consulting clients, and I'll pause for a second and say, there's 3 different things that I do, which you guys will see on the next slide when we get to a little bit about me, but we're not there yet, is I provide implementation consulting. I teach the ISO standards, including how to audit the standards. And I am an auditor, including I'm under contract with certification bodies to actually audit ISO management systems. And there's more than one management system, and we're going to talk about the implications about that as we go along also. But frequently, one of the early things that end up having to work with clients on is just trying to get them to understand what is it, what are the expectations of things. And you're going to get the benefit of a lot of that during the course of today's presentation, as well as, as necessary to supplement based upon the questions that you asked. So again, this seminar is intended to help you and is not a marketing opportunity for me. I can assure you that I've got plenty of business these days, and so is the company to be able to handle that. And frankly, an ISO certification is not necessary or appropriate for all organizations. From time to time, I do point out to organizations that there may be something else that you actually need to be looking at pursuing in terms of prioritization or whatever. So on the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit again about what an ISO certification is and what that means. And then we're going to take, sort of the redneck approach. You might be a redneck if approach to you might need an ISO certification if. So I'm going to go through the business drivers of why some organizations believe that an ISO certification would be a smart investment, not only for them, but in advance of sort of what is an ISO certification all about. The ISO certifications, while they give the internal organization confidence that they're doing certain things well, mainly ISO certifications these days are pursued to extend confidence to your customers. So in a broad basis, there's a term called stakeholders or the interested parties and stuff, and those are internal and external. But then there are also unusual reasons why folks go after ISO certifications, including, for instance, in certain cases, it might reduce the insurance premiums for the company. In other cases, it may be a contract requirement. And so we'll go through that because that is going to be one of the leading things is that frequently companies, and I've got really large clients that have gone through ISO certification, because if they didn't get certified, they could not continue to do business with their business partners. And that's more prevalent in Europe than I would say in the US, but it happens in the United States also. Right, then we're going to talk about some examples of ISO management systems. So the important thing with that to start out with is not all ISO standards are management systems. And so the ISO management systems that you can be certified to are management systems. And there's roughly about 80 of them. We're going to go through a couple of examples, but I'm going to tell you that, trying to go through and account for all 80 of them could be a seminar all by itself. But we'll work our way through that. So then what does an ISO management system look like? And in advance, before we get into that, since 2012, when ISO updated what's called ISO Directive 1 and published something called Annex SL, which was part of Directive 1, all of the management systems are intended to have the same look, feel, and requirements inside of them, in part to make it easier for people to adopt the management systems, but also to integrate them. So for instance, without identifying the company that I'm working with, I've got a couple of different clients that have more than one ISO management system requirement. So one in particular has got a quality management system that they've had for a long time, but they're looking at information security and business continuity management as add-ins. So because the management systems look the same, you can glue them together and they can reinforce each other. All right, but the other interesting thing about the ISO management systems is they tend not to attempt to set basically standards and requirements for like information security management. You wouldn't really see that inside of another management system because they have a management system. ISO has a management system that's defined for information security management. So the management systems are kept distinct and tend not to step on the toes of the other management systems inside here. Then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what a certification roadmap might look like. And I'm going to communicate that on sort of a broad basis because there's usually certain attributes that are pretty much the same with organizations. But also in advance, I'm going to tell you sometimes the roadmap requires an organization, which is related to one of the consulting projects that I was working on this morning, is conveying to the organization, you're not ready actually to even attempt to put a management system in place. There's certain things that are sort of prerequisites that you're going to need to address, and we're going to need to tackle those areas first. And then we can start you down the path of trying to put a management system in. But in terms of organizational readiness, if we don't fix those areas first, you're not going to be successful, or you would predictably end up failing the audit. So trying to get through that. And then naturally, by the back end of it, we're going to open it up for Q&A, and I'll be happy to answer. And I'm really hoping that you have great questions and stuff. So I've been doing this for a number of years, actually, especially in the area of information security management. I've been doing information security management related stuff for almost 40 years now. And as I like to joke with a lot of folks, if I'm not good at it by now, I should probably just give up. So I've had enough opportunity to sort of hone my skills. But one of the things that makes me really effective as a consultant and clients really appreciate is I have a perspective that basically any first-year information security professional can make information security complicated. And that doesn't really help management or the organization out very much. So instead, I try and focus on the fundamentals and to make the concepts simple to understand and to be able to implement and stuff. And that, in large part, has been a huge reason why I'm so successful inside the community today. And you guys will end up seeing a little bit of that as we go through this presentation. But again, this is pretty much the agenda. And again, you're going to be able to submit questions as you go. We may pick up some of those early, but certainly in the last 15 minutes of the session, we fully intend to try and answer as many questions. And again, I'm hoping that you have really great questions. I'm kind of looking forward to that portion of the presentation and stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and it's just a real quick point. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this slide. What this slide effectively says is that I'm like highly qualified and highly credentialed inside of here. So, and I've got a lot of credibility with my clients. And so if I go back to the thing about one of my fortes is making things simple, I have to do that constantly, because as you'll notice, in just about every line item in here, I am not only credentialed in the area, but for the different trade associations and stuff, I teach stuff. So in the area of like ISO, I'm certified and have been for some time on 9001. 9001 is a quality management system standard. And I'm going to take a quick segue real quick and point out the ability of the standards to interact. So sometimes when I'm teaching like an information security course, which would be the 27001 standard that's on here, that's the information security management standard, and 20,000 is service management, and 22301 is business continuity management, and there are other areas that I've got expertise in as well. But in terms of being a lead auditor and being able to teach and stuff, these are pretty much the dominant areas I spend time in. Let's talk about a question that I like to ask a lot of times in classes that I'm teaching. Does 9001, which is quality management, have anything to do with 27001, which is information security management? And the answer is yes. As a matter of fact, I'd emphatically say absolutely. So students are kind of frequently perplexed about that. Why would they have a relationship? All right, so the three objectives of information security and the focus of basically what we're trying to do with an information security management system is protect the organization's needs for confidentiality. And I'm going to pause and say that confidentiality or compromise of confidentiality, to be simple about this, can be reduced down to two words: unauthorized disclosure. So whether it's accidental or intentional or malicious or whatever else, when you have unauthorized disclosure of information, that's a compromise of confidentiality. When we look at the other two, integrity's compromise would be defined as unauthorized modification or destruction of data, and availability could simply be viewed as an authorized entity, because we don't really care about the unauthorized entities. They're not supposed to be doing anything with the data anyway. But when an authorized entity, which could be a human, a network device, or code module, is not able to act on and process data on demand, then we've got a problem with availability. Okay, so now let's go back to our association with 9001 inside of here. So you have a compromise of the quality state of the data when you have a compromise of the security objectives that are intended to be protected by ISO 27001. So like last week, I was up dealing with a certified quality management company, and they were trying to understand the implications of information security management. And that's one of the things I explained to them. So you guys have data, and that data is what drives your organization, and you spend time in quality management making sure that the data is what it's supposed to be. And information security is just a different way of making sure that the quality state of your data, and as it contributes to the business objectives that you guys have, are protected reasonably. Service management's a little bit that way also. Actually, 9001 and 20,000 have a really tight historical relationship with each other, because 9001 is concerned about quality management, or basically the risks of losing the quality state of the data. 20,000 is about products and services. And so usually what you're measuring with quality is related to your products and services. So, relationship there, and then also 22301. So a real quick representation that the standards they do have the potential and can be glued together and can reinforce and help protect your organization and organizations that frequently after one ISO management standard, it's not unusual. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's not unusual that they start to pursue other ISO management standards because they start to understand the benefits of what it does. All right, in the world of IC squared, so taught CISSP curriculum going back about 20 years. So I'm roughly number 1,200 in a world where there's over 140 or 150,000 CISSPs out there. The CAP, or the CAP credential, is Federal Information Security Management. The CCSP is Cloud Security. And the last one is a healthcare specialty area. In ISAC, I hold all 5 of the big 4 certifications, so governance, systems auditing, security management, risk management, and data protection. In IEEE, that's a very comprehensive biometrics certification and stuff. But a lot of the things that I know and understand from ISO are things that I end up applying across all the other areas. And then I have privacy certs and teach that as well. So again, real simply, after 40 years, if I'm not good at it, I should probably give it up. And I am highly credentialed and very well respected inside of the world. And because of that, I don't really spend a lot of time marketing at all. You know, I have repeat business and customers that refer me to other customers and other things that are associated with it. So, and that is a picture of me on the slide. All right, so let's move on to the next thing here. All right, so what is an ISO certification? Well, ISO is an international standards organization. They publish literally, and I mean this directly, thousands of standards. And again, not all of the standards are effectively management standards. There's only about 80 of those out of the thousands of standards that they are, but they basically set uniform representations that are published out there about how things are created or built or processes or, you know, life cycle models and stuff. And just about every country in the world has a national representative to the ISO organization that's based in Switzerland. And then there's a whole process for like certification processes where there's a national authority. So in the United States, it would be ANSI, and the UK it would be British Standards Institute as examples that oversee and certify what are called certification bodies, but they're generally just referred to as the certification auditors that are allowed to certify companies or entities to the ISO standards. And there's very rigorous practices and procedures and credentialing and stuff that goes behind that to give confidence to the marketplace that when an organization is issued an ISO certificate, it's not just some paper drill. To say that sort of slightly differently, you can't walk, if an auditor walks in and asks you for your required documentation, which is the first, what's called the first stage or stage 1 of auditing, you're going to have to be able to demonstrate that you meet all the minimum requirements of the standard. But it's far from a paper drill. The second portion of the audit, or stage 2, is an on-site audit. And during that time period or process, the company is actually being asked to demonstrate that it lives and has a management system that actually manages the behavior and outcomes of the organization. So it's not just a collection of documents, and sometimes that's, you know, a misunderstanding. As a matter of fact, there are a number of misunderstandings and stuff that are associated with it. One of the common misunderstandings, for instance, is associated with ISO certifications, especially for ISO 27001, which again is the Information Security Management Standard. That standard is only about 30 pages long. And it's a very important standard, but half of the standard is Annex A, which identifies 114 security controls that are available to reduce the risk or mitigate the risk to an organization. And so a common misunderstanding in terms of certification is I have to pay a lot of attention to the 114 security controls because that's half of it. And if that's half of it, it must really be damned important and stuff. That's not the case, actually. So the way that you normally blow an ISO certification in auditing is that you don't pay attention to the management clauses, of which are 4 through 10, which we're going to talk about inside of this presentation. The management standard clauses are the clauses that are actually identifying what does it mean to live the management system. And so the Annex A stuff in 27.1 is literally, if you went to 6.13 C and D inside there, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on, it identifies risk treatment, specifically risk mitigation. And the way that you mitigate risk is by using security controls, and the security controls in Annex A, the 114 security controls, is just basically an inventory of different ways in which you would achieve the intent of 6.1.C and D inside of there. So you got to drill way down into the management clause to get to the point where it starts to even talk about what Annex A is. And Annex A is only really intended, even despite the fact that it's half of the page count, is really only intended to meet the expectation of 6.1.C in the risk treatments section, or 6.13 C and D inside the risk treatment area. So, you know, one of the things about ISO certifications then is just trying to go through the process of understanding what the standard is and stuff. And so, like with one of the clients that I was recently working with, what I told them is that to understand 27,001, you have to understand the range of supporting publications that auditors use. As a matter of fact, you need to learn how to evaluate your ISO implementation the way that an auditor is going to have to look at it and stuff. And that becomes, now all of a sudden, we're not talking about 30 pages. We start to talk about literally hundreds of pages of reference material that help you understand. For instance, like 27,003 is the implementation guide that goes into great detail and says this single sentence inside the standard that says this is what we meant. So if you're going to try and do this, these are the things in terms of best practices that you should be thinking about. You don't have to do all of it, but to the degree that it actually helps you implement your management system, that's basically what you should be doing to try and make sure. And if you can basically answer and be responsive to, so this is a requirement, this is what we did, this is why we believe that we're meeting the standard. If you can carry on that conversation with an auditor that way, it's very much as I talk with a lot of my consulting clients, interacting with an ISO certification auditor is a lot like going on a first date. The first 5 minutes matter, and how you set that impression with the auditor is really critical. So if the auditor's first 5-minute impression is, I think you guys are going to be a train wreck, he's going to ask lots of questions, or she is going to ask lots of questions to try and disprove the initial impression that they've got. But if their initial impression is you're completely on top of things, you speak ISO to me properly, the vocabulary that you're using is the ISO vocabulary and stuff, then I have more confidence as an auditor that you are going to actually be able to successfully represent that you meet the audit criteria. So when an auditor walks in, he's got 3 things that he's got to pay attention to in an ISO world. What's the objective? And largely the objective is, you know, determine whether you can or cannot be certified. What is the scope? And that's basically how broad the system is. And I'm going to pause for a second off of this and point out that you do not, for like ISO 27001 for information security management, you do not have to apply for and get the whole company certified. That's not the requirement. You as an organization have to determine what you want to represent to the marketplace as certified. So I've seen cases, I'll give you an example of a 3,000 employee company in Virginia that has an ISO 27001 certificate. They are certified. They can show you their certificate. You can talk to their certification body about that and stuff, but there's no question that they're certified. But if you read the scope statement in the certificate, you'll find that what was certified was a single system that only has 5 employees out of 3,000 that are subject to the ISO certification. So a common misunderstanding that a lot of individuals have is you have to do the whole enterprise. No, you don't actually. So ISO will certify whatever you believe needs to be certified. And for a lot of organizations, what they want to have certified is that portion of their systems or their capabilities of their products or whatever else that are customer facing or facing their business partners. And they're not really too worried about their back-end systems. Some companies want to have their back-end systems certified as well. But the key point to understand is you get to choose that. And if that's what you're asking to have certified, if that is the scope or the boundaries, then that's all that's actually going to get observed. And as a certification auditor, when I see things that are outside the boundary, I may remark to the company, just to be professionally courteous, to make sure that they're aware that there appears to be an issue that may require management attention. But under no circumstances can I actually incorporate that into the audit report or use that as part of a certification decision. So anything that's on the other side of the boundary is not actually subject to the audit and the determinations of certification. The third thing is what's called criteria. And the criteria is frequently the standard itself. So like in an ISO 27001 based certification, there are a number of requirements that an organization has to demonstrate. And anything that represents a significant material risk or would create a significant potential for failure of the management system to achieve its intended outcomes. So it's not adequate, it's not suitable, it's not effective. Those are the things that actually cause an audit failure with an organization. If you have basically a minor record keeping thing, you could even have several minor record keeping things that wouldn't necessarily indicate, it does indicate you could have done better, frankly. I shouldn't be finding those issues. The standard is very clear about what the expectations are, and as I frequently will tell auditees or audit clients, you shouldn't be surprised by the finding. It's pretty black and white. We're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. If we're not sure it's an audit finding, it's not yet an audit finding, I'm going to ask more questions and ask for more evidence so that I can make a determination. But when there is what's called a nonconformity, and nonconformities are either major. So again, the management system is either doesn't exist, it's contrived, it can't achieve its objective, it's highly at risk of not achieving its objective. That's going to be a major finding. But the other things that are just, minor infractions or deviations from the standard and stuff are not going to actually result in what I'll characterize as an audit failure determination, where we wouldn't recommend that you actually get certified and stuff. So again, training and a proper understanding of what the intent of the standard is and an understanding of why you're achieving the intent of the standard, and to any degree additional requirements the organization has created for itself would be important. The last thing I'll comment about this real briefly, because we're going to cover this a little bit more in detail later in the presentation, would be related to regulatory requirements. So stakeholders, as I mentioned before, are internal and external and include your regulatory bodies. So if you're openly violating a regulatory requirement, it is going to be deemed to be a major finding because you're not honoring the interests and expectations and needs of the parties. All right, so let's move to the next thing. You might need an ISO certification if, for instance, you are looking for best practices, especially in a young organization that's trying to basically grow up and have maturity a little bit faster. An ISO certification process is going to force you to adopt best practices because, you know, let's be realistic. You're not likely, as you stand up your brand new company, to create new ways of basically doing it the wrong way. So the ISO certification is really kind of a representation of time-proven best practices that if you don't do the following things, serious consequences and adverse impacts and stuff are going to happen. So an ISO certification is generally one of the ways to actually get to accelerate organizational maturity into a company. You might need an ISO certification if your customers think you, and I want to use this in the proper professional context, that you suck. So as a supplier and stuff, then maybe an ISO certification would help you understand how to fix those issues so that you can sustain confidence in the marketplace and be able to continue doing business with your clients. You might need an ISO certification if a business partner is using that for third-party risk management. And right now in the third-party risk management world, it is highly common that your business partners will require that you are certified. For instance, even the federal government now actually awards extra bonus points in competitions on a competitive basis for commercial companies that are providing goods and services to the federal government, that they do actually have ISO certifications, whether it's a 9001 cert or 27001, which would actually correlate. So I'm not going to explain this term in detail, but there's a new thing going on in DoD acquisition world referred to as CMMC, which is basically an assurance mechanism for the federal government to believe that the contractors are not putting them at risk, including the federal government's data that's associated with that. So one of the big drivers in the world of ISO certification, if nothing else, is a third-party risk management consideration where one company's telling the other, we won't do business with you unless you can basically demonstrate to this. The best example that I can give to you that happened over the last couple of years, one of my clients who successfully got ISO certified, and I'm proud to say actually the auditor said that they thought it was one of the best implementations that they've ever seen, that, you know, you always appreciate getting a compliment like that. But that company, I'm going to say, had to reach a really easy determination about ISO certification. When their business partner came to them, it's basically a customer, and said, if you're not ISO certified for 27001, we're going to move all of our business. That business that they were talking about moving was $80 million a year. And so for that client, it was a very simple decision about, do we want to get ISO certified or not? Of course, there's other examples that I could give you inside of here, but there's lots of reasons. And the important thing is that you understand that sometimes it's not really whether you think that it's important or not. Not that there aren't benefits for an organization. You know, for instance, I've seen cases where new management teams have come in to organizations that are struggling, and they don't have enough time to figure out all the things that are wrong that caused the discharge or release of the previous management team. One of the things that they'll step in and say is, we're going to put an ISO system in, and we may not intend on being certified, but we are going to go through the process of putting in ISO management system in place. We'll decide whether we're going to get certified or not. But I know that this is the type of behavior the organization needs to be able to demonstrate. And whether we ever get certified or not, this is how I want the organization to act. So, you know, different reasons why we see that. All right, so then moving to the next thing, what are examples of ISO management systems? And I'm going to approach this on a brief basis because I really want to spend more time on the upcoming slides. So these are just representative. Again, this isn't the 80 plus or 90, we could be up to 90 now, management systems, but these are quick examples. So quality management systems, which have got a long history in the world of ISO. 20,000, which is service management. For some of you, you would know this as ITIL or the IT infrastructure library. But ISO is taken basically ITIL v4. So about a little over, well now, pretty close, coming up 2 years now. ITIL v4 got upgraded and they added extensions. They really didn't change ITIL v3 very much. They basically said, you know, to be able to glue ITIL or service management to other business processes like DevOps and capability maturity models and stuff, they created extensions to be able to allow you to plug your management systems into things in your organization that aren't actually management system related, so that all of your activities and stuff and the things you're trying to do with your organization can be glued together. Business continuity management, 27,000 would be information security management. But there are things like records management systems, which is the 3301 standard, or the anti-bribery management standard, or asset management, which is the 5,000 series and stuff. And there's just, again, energy management, occupational health and safety. There are a lot of management systems. And so again, you know, why you're going to put them into place is entirely up to you. Whether you want to actually use a couple of them, like right now I've got a client who needs to be able to get certified to 27,001. But because of other reasons, they're going to take parts of 20,001 on service management and implement that together. So they have no intentions of being 20,000 certified, but they think that actually some of the parts of 20,000 will improve their ability to get their 27,001 system in place. And so working on that regard. So again, those are just examples and stuff. And there's only, you know, there's a little bit over 80 specific management systems and literally thousands of ISO standards out there. Not all of them are. So, and that would sort of bring up the question, well, what would a management system actually look like? And this is the part I think that a lot of you will find most of interest. And again, you know, if I take some of the management standards that have Annex A security or manufacturing or quality controls or records management controls, because, you know, if we took 3301, it has an annex that actually explains a collection of 19 controls to actually manage records more effectively, whether those are memos or, you know, purchasing orders or whatever it is, to make sure that it matches up. So here's the structure that ISO Directive 1 lays out in Annex SL that defines the standard structure of a management system. And since 2012, with very few exceptions. So for instance, I'll tell you that the quality management standard for medical device, class 2 medical devices, doesn't actually have this structure to it, and there's reasons why they elected not to do it with that standard. But 90% of the management standards have this structure, and again, it really affords an organization the ability to glue the management systems together, and it also makes it easier for the auditors to understand what to look for and stuff. So, you know, and so we'll see that what this looks like. I'm going to step through each one of these and tell you basically what Annex L requires. And in certain cases, I'll tell you in advance, some of the standards extend this. They have additional subsections or subclauses, but largely they all have this exact structure. They just may add in some additional things. So here, let's go ahead and take a look at this. All right. So the first thing is all of them no longer required, but they basically set up an expectation that you have either the Deming model or something that looks like the Deming model to support continuous improvement in the organization. And so Deming model is named after W. Edwards Deming, the guy who basically helped the Japanese establish quality management practices back, if for those of you that are aware of it, after World War II, the manufacturing base and things that were made out of Japan were regarded as basically junk. And it adversely affected the Japanese manufacturing industry's ability to compete on a global basis. And they understood that they needed to fix that. So the guy that the government of Japan actually consulted with was Deming, who's generally considered to be the father of modern quality control. Actually, the thing that I like about Deming, aside from the fact that he's a cantankerous, or he was a cantankerous old guy, are the number of quotes that he's famous for. And my favorite quote from Deming is, "Without statistics, you're just another person with an opinion." All right, so the Deming model is pretty simple. It says basically you have to plan whatever you're going to do before you start spending energy in doing stuff. You need to plan and understand what you're going to do. And so I'm going to tell you in advance clauses 4 or 5. I'll go back here. Clauses 4, 5, 6, and 7 are all planning activities. The do side of it is operation. The check side of it is going to be performance evaluation. And the act side of it is in improvement. So plan really consumes a lot of things in the management standard, the way that they're set up. So again, what we do for 4 for context of the organization, 5 for leadership, 6 for support, 7 for resources, and stuff. All of those things are all planning activities. Do is the operational side. Check is basically performance measurement, and act is continuous improvement side of the model in a standard ISO clause. All right, so here's the context of the organization. This is management clause 4. It always has at least 4 subsections in it. The first part is understanding the organization and its context. So why does the organization even exist? Then under 4.2 is understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. So you generally exist to actually serve or provide something out there. And so in 4.2, they make the management committee or top management overseeing the management system responsible for, you need to understand what your customers, both your internal and external interested parties, want out of the management system, and make sure that their interests are protected, that the risks to the things that they want are addressed, and that the objectives and outcomes of the management system are focused on achieving what the needs and expectations of the interested parties are, including the management of the company itself is an interested party. But other interested parties that sometimes people get surprised by, so again, I think I mentioned this earlier, if you get an ISO 27001 certificate, you can go to your insurance company and get a reduction of your insurance premiums. They're interested in the fact that you're actually certified. Other cases would be, for instance, fire rescue services in the area. So to make sure that they're able to actually be able to perform their duties, you would want to make sure that you've got a relationship with them and they understand how to get into your building, like the New Hampshire trip that I had last week. Big thing with that organization is they have hazardous materials that the fire department understands what type of hazardous materials that you've got and stuff. So there's a wide range of interested parties, and in many cases, parties that organizations traditionally won't focus on. Then we get to 4.3. As I said before, the entire organization does not have to be certified by the management standard. You pick that, right? So that goes through, and you're going to get that, and then basically, so the XXX is basically whatever the nature of the management system is inside of here. If we go to 5, this is going to be the leadership section. So in leadership and commitment, the organization has to have proper governance. Part of that's establishing policy, roles, responsibilities, the authorities, because without that, things are really not going to happen properly. Then we get into planning. So you need to understand that the risks and opportunities. Risk is basically uncertainty. And as I like to joke, risk is a 4-letter word. But without proper controls and stuff in place that actually create predictable outcomes for you, you're going to have to depend on another four-letter word called luck. So, and risk is not a bad thing. So if you take an insurance company without risk, they wouldn't even have a business model. And there's very few things that you can pursue as opportunities that don't have risks, that basically the opportunity won't turn out properly and stuff. Then you have to be able to set your objectives and stuff associated with it. In resources, this is really pretty simple. So everything from staff resources and budgeting and stuff. Competence, so going back to roles and responsibilities in 5-3, an individual who's not competent to perform their job under the management system is just another manifestation of risk. They may be committed, well-intended and stuff, and completely create the next train wreck in the organization. We need to make sure that the people that are subject to the management system are aware and that we communicate with them, that the records and stuff that we need to maintain for the management system are appropriately established, that they're defined and implemented and controlled properly and stuff associated with that. And then on operations, this is kind of the interesting side of the management system. So the one section that has to be there is the operational planning and control of the processes. But depending upon the nature of the management system, this section can look very different. And that's okay. So, you know, it's basically how you tailor the management system. But 9 and 10 are exactly the same across all management systems. 9.1 says that if you're going to set objectives, you know, if it's important enough to set an objective, you probably need to measure that. You need to be aware of how you're doing. So the capability to monitor and measure, do analysis and evaluation, and maintain ongoing awareness about your objectives for your management system have to be tracked. You need an internal audit function. So, you know, much like we don't ask people to edit their own writing, because if they knew they had something wrong, they would have corrected it. We have people who are not actually responsible for implementing the management system audit the system to make sure that it is actually achieving its objectives. And ultimately, when we go back to leadership, which was section 5, the leadership that's established by the policy, roles, and responsibilities has to review on an ongoing basis. Frequency's up to you. Has to be able to review the management system, make sure it's achieving its intended outcomes. If it's not, then we need corrective actions implemented to address our nonconformities. And everything can be better, but frequently the thing that people don't understand is that continual improvement doesn't mean that it actually has to deliver better customer satisfaction. Sometimes you can reduce the customer satisfaction and improve the cost performance of the management system. And if that's what it looks like, that's fine. All right, finally, on roadmap, because we want to get to the questions and stuff inside of here. In the certification roadmap, effectively, and I'll make this real simple, a certification roadmap, you literally start with management clauses 4, 5, 6, and 7, the plan side of the Deming model, and get those in place. You don't start with 10 or 9. And a matter of fact, it doesn't really help you at all to work on those sections. You can be aware of what you think the intended outcome is going to look like. But really, you need to go through the process of establishing clause 4, clause 5, 6, and 7, and then operationalize your system, turn it on, and run it for a while so it can be audited under 9.2. And you do get the opportunities to improve it under 10, and you can demonstrate that the management system is working. The last thing that I'm going to say about this before we move to the questions, and a common misunderstanding, sometimes I'll be talking with clients about, so, all right, we need to, so looking at stuff that's going on, we need to document that as a nonconformity in the internal audit and identify the corrective actions. And they get all spooked about, yeah, but that'll look like I've got a flawed management system. And I'll have to explain to them that if you tell an auditor, certification auditor on his way in the door, you believe you have a perfect system, you've already rectified minute first date rule that I articulated earlier. You're going to raise all sorts of suspicions with them. The expectation of a management system is it's not perfect. Otherwise, we wouldn't even really need to go audit them if you could get a perfect system. The expectation is that when the management system deviates from its intent, that you will detect that at the earliest opportunity, understand how to fix it, put corrective action in, and make it better. All right, so that's really kind of the focus. With that, so I hope that was a good introduction for you. Let's see what types of questions we have now.
All right. I'm going to give everyone a minute or two just to drop in some questions here. Just while you're doing that, wanted to just have a quick reminder that, if you're interested in the material that's presented in this webinar today, or if you have any questions that's regarding anything what's available to you, please contact your local center for more information. You can log on to newhorizons.com and do a quick zip code search for the center nearest you. We've been delivering online classes since 2001, and our facilitators are trained to engage our learners and encourage our, class participation. So please check out our website and make sure that you can see what's out there and where our centers are in relation to you. As I had mentioned earlier, our schedule for webinars this month, we are focusing on cybersecurity awareness. I know Dallas has another session, I believe, next week. So if you haven't already, make sure to register for his upcoming session as well. And lastly, just another reminder, this session is being recorded, so you can share the recording link when that gets sent out later today with folks who weren't able to join, or to share with anyone who you feel like this information may be really, really important and insightful for. Just taking a look at the questions box. I haven't seen anything coming in just yet, Dallas. So I'm going to give folks another minute or two just to type in any questions that they do have, really in relation to the ISO certification and why it's so important. If you have any questions, please feel free to type that in now. We'll take a second here to pause and make sure you have a chance to type those in. All right. One question that did come in, Dallas, is you had mentioned ITIL, but this person said, I don't believe companies can get ITIL certified. Can you please repeat what is the equivalent of getting ITIL certified?
The equivalent of getting ISO certified in what industrial area, for instance? Other audits and things that can be performed would be like what are referred to as soccer service organization controls from AICPA, or frequently a requirement. Organizations get audited and certified for PCI DSS credit card processing. There are audits that are done to meet federal requirements. So there's a wide range of things. I'll say that the general rules and approach and philosophies about auditing are generally the same. So you don't see a lot of fundamental principle differences and stuff in how you get audited. There's always criteria that you're measured against. It's generally not ambiguous. So it's easy to tell whether you do or do not meet the requirements or not.
Great. Thanks for answering that, and see if we have any others. All right. Well, I think that You did such a great job, Dallas, of just answering and really talking about the ISO certification in great detail. We don't have any other questions at the moment, but with that being said, thank you for presenting on behalf of New Horizons. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And again, as you mentioned, so the next seminar that I'll be providing later this month is on how to establish a privacy management program. Also an area that I've got a lot of expertise in as well. And I look forward to that seminar if that would be of interest to the audience.
Oh, yes, likewise. With that being said, everyone, thank you again for joining us. That concludes our webinar. You may now log off. Thank you.